Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth session in the second series of American English Live Teacher Development. My name is Lauren, and I'll be with you today along with my colleagues behind the scenes, Kate and Heather. They'll be serving as moderators to help answer your questions and respond to your comments throughout the session. Today, John Mark will be talking with Shelly Sanchez Terrell about how teachers can get their students out of their seats and moving, while also promoting English language learning through use of their mobile phones. So let's go ahead and get started.
Hi, Lauren. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you doing, John Mark?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I'm pretty excited about today's session. How about you?
I'm also really excited. It's going to be a
Yeah?
good.
Well, great. Well, everybody, as Lauren said, I'm John Mark King, and I work here in Washington, D.C. at the Office of English Language Programs, and I'm part of the American English social media team. I am super happy to be your facilitator and your host today. We'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our first-time viewers, and are also very happy to see those of you who have attended previous events. As always, it's great to be with you all. Let's start with these AE Live viewing group photos featuring teachers at the American Corner in Pristina, Kosovo, and teachers from across Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory. We love to see teachers learning and sharing ideas as they view these American English Live sessions. So thanks, guys, for sending your pictures in. We love them. Please share your viewing photos by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org or by sharing them on social media. If you do that, make sure to tag us at American English for Educators so that we can see your great photos. We may feature one of your photos in an upcoming session. All right, let's take a moment to remember all the great topics we learned about during this series, because today is the final one in the current series. Our presentations were on the topics of classroom management, using authentic materials, and teaching with technology. Today is the last session of Series 2. We've enjoyed learning with you throughout the series, as always, and we're looking forward to learning with you in our upcoming series, which will begin on September the 5th. We're going to go over more details at the end of today's session, so stay tuned for that. All right, here's a little bit about what you can expect today if it's your first time. Each session is about 60 minutes long, and it's usually linked on a Teacher's Corner theme that you can find on the American English website. The moderators will share links to those resources in the comment box. Just like that, we hope you'll find those resources useful. The presenter will present the material, and I, as the host, will ask questions and make comments too. But most important is that we want to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your ideas and your experiences as we talk. So please share your thoughts using the comments feature or the chat box. We look forward to it. And when our session comes to a close in about 1 hour, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the session, we'll share a link in the comments and at the top of this post. Click on that link, complete a short quiz about today's session, get 2 out of 3 questions correct, but don't worry, it's not too difficult. If you joined us and you watched the entire session, I bet you'll have absolutely no problem filling it out. And we're going to leave the link open until Monday, July the 16th. So if you want to watch the recording again, take the quiz later, no problem at all. And once you have successfully passed the quiz, like I know you all will, you can expect to get your badge by email from americanenglish@state.gov in about 1 week. Speaking of digital badges, we thought it was great to see some of you proudly sharing the badges you earned earlier in the series on social media, as you can see right here. Feel free to share your digital badge by posting it on your social media account and tagging us, American English for Educators. We look forward to seeing those reflections of your professional accomplishment online soon. And now, today's session. We like to move it, hands-on language learning with mobile devices. Mobile devices can be used as tools for helping students to get out of their seats and learn English through engaging activities focused on exploration and speech. During today's session, participants will explore how to use mobile devices to enhance all 4 language skills, learn how to adapt high-tech activities for the low-tech classroom, and discover how to promote active learning and keep students focused. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Shelly Sanchez-Terrell. Shelly is an award-winning digital innovator, instructional designer, and author. She's trained teachers and taught English language learners in more than 20 countries worldwide. Shelly was named Woman of the Year by the National Association of Professional Women, awarded a BAMI as a founder of #EdChat, and received 2 Elton nominations by the British Council. Shelly, it's wonderful to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, John Mark, for that introduction.
It's wonderful to have you. I'm so excited about your presentation.
I'm excited as well, and I hope the audience is excited to be
Oh,
able
they
to
certainly
learn
are. We know that they are.
to use a mobile device to be able to engage their learners, get them moving, and also to help inspire them to practice and learn English. So let's go ahead and begin. Uh, First, I want to address a few concerns because I know in the Facebook page and also on the English for teaching forum, there were a lot of concerns about students and using technology and mobile devices and how they get distracted. But the famous linguist David Crystal actually gathered a lot of research that showed using mobile devices helps students to read and write, and also can be used to really help them learn English. And the reason why is because our learners spend a lot of time on their devices. Now, what if we were able to get them to dedicate some of those hours to learning English and also our content? Wouldn't that be very cool?
Shirley, I think it makes a lot of sense, actually, since they already know how to use these devices. Most of our students already have them. Why not use them in the classroom?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, one of the concerns is being distracted, but we'll address those concerns and some others as well throughout the session. So moving on, let's go ahead and see what you will walk away with by the end of the session. You will have ideas for getting students to practice speaking, listening, reading, and writing in English. Also, which is really important, is that a lot of these activities, well, all of them, you can do without the use of the internet. A lot of teachers often say, they don't have reliable internet or that students aren't able to access the internet. So you don't need the internet for any of these activities. You can use them offline. And we will also share ideas for getting students to move with their devices, and while they're moving, to also speak in English and also interact with their peers, learn vocabulary, focus on grammar, lots of fun, and learning English at the same time. So let's go ahead and begin, and let's look at the session outline. First, we're going to start with an introduction to mobile learning. And this is also going to include reflecting on what kind of devices are available to us, and also what are some of the challenges that we have when implementing mobile learning. We will then learn about some tips for keeping students focused and on task. And then we will go into some activities. And the activities we're going to look at are basically using the features of taking pictures or recording a video or recording audio.
So Shelly, it looks to me like, let's say I'm the teacher watching this presentation online right now, and I'm probably thinking, I don't really know anything about using mobile devices. Maybe I have one. My students know so much. I don't see how this is going to be any more than just a distraction in the classroom. I think you're going to help us with that, right? So if I'm a teacher that feels like I don't think I can use technology in the classroom, you're going to give us pointers on how to do it, right?
Absolutely. So stick around because not only will I give you some ideas, but I know the audience definitely has some ideas as well.
That's great.
And so now we're going to think about the types of devices your students might have available to them. Sometimes when we hear mobile learning or using mobile devices, we think of cell phones or we think of smartphones or an iPad, and this can be really expensive. I've taught in many different countries, and students are don't have the money to be able to have those very expensive devices, but often they might have a digital camera or an MP3 player or a game console or a tablet. And all of these you're able to carry around. And a lot of these you can take pictures, you can record a video, you can record audio, and do multiple tasks, which are really great for learning English and practicing the four skills.
So any kind of device you mean, it doesn't have to be a fancy smartphone. It can be like 20 years old and like, weigh like 5 kilos, but as long as it takes pictures or it can record audio or possibly video, you can use it in the classroom.
Yes, absolutely. And if we think about it, all of those tasks are really great for visualizing vocabulary or getting students to speak, getting them to interact with each other as well.
That's wonderful.
So let's go ahead and think about what you already know because you do it with your mobile device every day. Sometimes you've dedicated several hours to accomplishing these tasks with your mobile device. So think about, if you've sent any text messages, which I'm sure you have. So there's probably about 2 or 3 tasks that you see here that you have spent hours doing and practicing. So that should help you to feel a little bit more confident when you're using a mobile device in the classroom, because you've probably recorded a video or definitely taken some pictures. Some of you may be familiar with downloading different apps, using apps, drawing, taking notes. Some of these are you may have not done, but you do know a few of these tasks.
This
And
is great. So
actually,
this is reminding our teachers out there that they actually know how to use mobile devices for these kinds of activities already, right? They just
yes,
need to move it into the classroom, right?
absolutely. And we want to hear from you. What are the things that we haven't even mentioned on here? Because there's so much you can do. It's a very, very powerful device that you've done or you thought about, using in the classroom to help your students and motivate them.
That's great. That's great. Well, Will says uses in the classroom pictures for scavenger hunts tied to specific communication skills.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's a really great way to get students not only moving, but also to be making those connections with building vocabulary.
Mm-hmm. And Alexander Nunez uses all of these. So I bet you for him, moving this into the classroom will be pretty easy.
Yeah, definitely. And so now that we've thought of some of the ways that we used a mobile device, then you can think of different types of activities which focus on getting students to build vocabulary or to learn a, some kind of grammar, or to help them practice speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And we definitely want to hear from you. What ideas can you think of already that would be great for learning English?
Well, Shelley, it was a while ago when I was last in the classroom, so I didn't have uh, mobile devices to bring into my classroom. At least I didn't think about it at the time. But what I like the idea of is text messaging in English.
Yeah, I think that's really great because even if you don't message someone else, you can, some of the ways I've seen students use the text messaging option is they'll text themselves the vocabulary, or if they want to remember a definition, then they'll put different words to be able to remember what that word was. So there's a lot of ways that you can use just the typing and the texting feature to remember vocabulary.
I love it. Well, speaking of vocabulary, Ankilun Dava uses a dictionary for the classroom, the electronic dictionary that's in the phone. Dara uses online grammar tests through a mobile device, and then recording audio, recording video, playing games. This is from Fernanda Peralta. So I think we have a pretty experienced group in our audience.
Yes, definitely. And all of those ways are really great for learning English. So let's go ahead and move on and look at what we're going to focus on. Of course, there's all of these great ideas that you shared, but we only have a short amount of time. So we're going to focus on taking pictures, producing videos, recording, and listening to audio. Let's begin by looking at how to keep students on task. And we definitely want to hear your ideas. We're going to share a few tips here. I'll begin with the very first tip, which is timing tasks. I like to break up different types of steps in a lesson and to put a time with them. So for example, I might time, tasks where for about 2 minutes or 3 minutes to really keep students focused. It could be something where, students are speaking and they're sharing what they have on a mobile device, and that could be 2 or 3 minutes. I think a physical timer, like a cooking timer or one, sometimes they call it an egg timer, is much better to use than the one that's actually on your mobile. And the reason for that is because often when I'm implementing mobile learning, I'm using my device, and it can be, it can interrupt me or interrupt the class time if all of a sudden I have to look down at my device and it's open to, something I want to show them. So I think a physical timer really helps with that.
So are you saying that you put the timer so that everybody can see it, how much time is left? Is that what you mean, Shelley?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I'll go through a big display and show, say, okay, we have 2 minutes. And sometimes if I see that students might be, to encourage them more or to keep them more focused, I'll even count down at certain points. I'll say, okay, 1 more minute. Let's start wrapping up.
I love it. That's great.
This also keeps the flow of the classroom. And so it's a kind of a good practice, I think, just for lessons in general, which leads on to the next tip, which is to pair group students. Now, you will find in the English teaching forum, or perhaps in some of the other sessions as well, some tips for pairing or grouping students. When you pair group students, it's important that each of them does a duty. So here you can see with my students, one of the students is taking down notes, another is offering ideas, and another is sharing what was gathered or the task that they completed on the mobile device. So if each of the students are working together and they all play a part, then that keeps them focused and on task. Also, I think it really helps them to, they don't want to disappoint each other. So they also help, motivate each other to be able to accomplish that task as well.
I think it's fantastic. And, I think our audience probably knows all about pairing or grouping students. During this series and previous series, we've talked about the value of pairing and grouping students. And so I like that we're taking something here that we already know. We know that it works, and we're adding something new to it. That would make it a bit easy to implement in the classroom, I think.
And that's very important because a lot of the tips and what we do in the classroom to manage um, just a lesson is very useful with the device as well. And so another tip that we have is to set up an area for the mobile devices. What I like to do is when my students walk in the classroom, they have an area set. It either can be different cups on a cart that has their name on it. And we do this at the beginning, but they know when they walk in, they put their device there, and then I'll put it in a safe spot. Or you could use shoe boxes, cubby holes. I've seen where there are shoe pouches hanging on the door. But what this does is that it lets students know, okay, there's a time when we're going to learn with the device, but when we're not learning with the device, we'll put them away and then we'll focus on other ways of learning English in the classroom. This also helps if you notice that students are not able to focus. Maybe they have, it's a really nice day, they want to go outside, or they are really hungry, or they just came from lunch, or there's so many different ways that they can get off task. And if you see that, they're just not able to concentrate that day, then you can say, okay, let's put them up. We'll come back to it another day.
Shirley, I think it's a good idea to have a mobile device area in your classroom no matter what, right? But then we got a comment, and I want to share this with you from Mohammed. Using mobile phone is not allowed in classrooms in Egypt. So what do you say to the teacher who isn't allowed to use phones or mobile devices in the classroom?
I think that's a really good question. So just because we can't use them in the classroom doesn't mean that we can't take advantage of mobile learning. There was an idea, and I believe it is by Larissa and some others as well, to be able to set up a Facebook group or another private website or blog or even a Moodle. And if you get your students to use their device to complete tasks at home, they're able to upload, images or the video or the audio in this safe place where their peers can see it. And that's one way that you're able to get students to learn with their mobile devices, but it's not in the classroom, it's at home.
I see. And the teacher can model the activity in the classroom that they're assigning for homework, right? With his or her own device.
Absolutely. And another thing the teacher can do is to show those examples in class. Sometimes what I like to do, you notice how you can achieve a digital badge here. Well, I don't require it because, of course, not all students might have access to a mobile device or the internet, but they can earn digital badges for accomplishing those tasks.
I love it. Thanks.
And finally, the last step I want to share with you is to outline clear expectations and consequences. So we think of this as rules, but it's a good practice to gather students, let them know, hey, we're going to try using mobile devices to learn English in this class period. And what do you think we should, how should we act with the mobile device? And students, you'll be surprised, will give you a lot of, they'll outline for you some different rules to follow. And then you can ask them, what are appropriate consequences? When you come up with the list, and you can add to it as well, put it on a poster, hang it in the classroom, or gather it on a sheet of paper. I call this a code of conduct. And I get students to sign and agree to these rules that we've come up with as a class.
Yeah, having clear expectations is something that should be part of every classroom, right? But with something that can be so distracting, I think it makes it even more important if you're going to be using mobile devices as part of your lesson, yeah?
Yes, definitely. And it gives students a chance to really reflect on their behavior using a mobile device. You would be surprised that even adult students that I've taught have to think about, maybe I shouldn't answer a phone call in the middle of class. And so it can really help them reflect on different types of manners when it comes to using a mobile device.
Thanks.
So let's go ahead and move on to some of these activities. Well, one of the easiest and most motivating way to use a mobile device to learn English is through taking photos. And so what I like to do is give students photo challenges. And so these are some of the ideas and challenges that I've used in my class. And I want you to think about some of the challenges that you can give your students. Think about some of the vocabulary or units or the topics that you teach, and let us know, different ways that you can adapt these different challenges that I'm about to present. So we'll go ahead and start with the first challenge, which is called show and tell with a cell. With this activity, students will gather in groups of 3 and they'll take out their device. They'll decide which photo they've taken to share with their peers, and they simply talk about it. They talk about, why they took that picture, why it's interesting, what was the story behind it. They get to learn about each other, and they also get to describe what's in a picture.
This is interesting. And, we got a comment that's relevant from the U.S. Embassy in Cuba. So using devices makes students become performers, not only spectators, which motivates them. I think that's the concept behind just about all that we're talking about today, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I actually really love that comment. It also gets them to own their learning because often we'll use different types of images that we find online, but in this way, students get to actually contribute their images and then we get to learn from them. So that's really cool as well.
That's great. And then a quick question though from Win, what if students have a phone but only one that can make and receive calls or send and receive messages?
That's a really important question. So what I like to do when I encounter someone who may not have a device that has images is that they're able to take a personal item, like maybe an earring, or sometimes I've had students have erasers that are very colorful or in characters. And so that's one way that they can still participate in show and tell, because it is show and tell. It's just they get to also use their device and show a picture instead of having the physical object there. Another idea is to prepare students ahead of time and let them know you can show a picture that you've taken on a device, and this gives them the opportunity to be able to bring in a digital camera or to be able to bring in a photo from home.
Thanks, I like it.
And let's move on to another photo challenge. This one is called I Spy with My Device. With I Spy, we are searching or exploring. You may have played this game when you were little. I did, and so that's why I thought of this idea. In this particular example, the first thing the teacher does is to teach students about different shapes. There's spheres, there's circles, there's squares, there's rectangles. And after the students have learned about the different shapes, the students are sent on a challenge to go exploring and spy these shapes either outside or in the classroom, or you can even have them take these pictures at home. When the student comes back, they're going to show their peers this photo. Now, it's important that you instruct students to take a zoomed in or close-up shot. And the reason is, as we will see in the next steps, is because their peers will have to guess two things, okay? So in step 3, in the next slide, students get to first guess what the photo is. What is the object? So John Mark, what would be my object here?
All right, I'm going to guess, Shelley, that this is a football, or in the US, a soccer ball.
Oh, great. So you got it. Yay. And next, the second thing he has to guess is what is the shape that's represented?
This is a sphere,
Yes.
right? Not a circle.
Although it could be argued, and I've had students, it's really interesting because some students will have where they'll show a picture like this, and some of the students will say it's a circle, and there are circles on this picture,
Mm.
but the student who originally took the picture will let them know, actually, I was taking a photo of a sphere. And so it's great because students get to help each other remember the vocabulary that they were taught. You don't only have to use shapes. You can play different versions of this. It could be I spy verbs, I spy whatever the vocabulary is that you're teaching. I spy emotions, I spy colors. And so there are a lot of ways that you can adapt this.
Well, we have a question from Mohammed who wants to know, what age do you recommend starting with an activity like this?
That's a really good question. So for an activity like this, and even the previous one, even very young learners, 5 or 6, that I've taught can participate because these were based on childhood games that were popular that I played, that you may be familiar with as well. Now, if you do use the device with very young learners like this, then you may want to get digital cameras instead. That might be a much safer option that parents will be okay with. Or, students can always, of course, use a camera if they want, or you can share a device, and sometimes I'll let students just borrow my device and take those pictures.
Well, you know what my rule is about that.
What is
If
your
I
rule?
give the device to my student and my student immediately puts it in their mouth, they're too young for that activity.
I think that's a very good rule to follow. So now let's take a look at another challenge. This one involves taking selfies. A lot of our students love selfies. This is actually a part of mobile learning culture. And this activity not only gets students to learn more about each other, but it gets them to reflect on their digital identity, which is important as well. What you do is get students to take different types of selfies that show them, learning a new skill, or maybe with their pet, with their favorite book. And for little ones, very young learners, you can have them take selfies of their favorite toy. So they don't have to take necessarily a selfie of themselves. Sometimes teachers have different characters, like a teddy bear that's like the class mascot, or maybe you've heard of Flat Stanley, which is this paper character. And the student can create a selfie adventure for them, and they can create a story to go with that.
Wow, this is great. And we're getting lots of great feedback. Dalila and Sarah and Samina, they all love these activities. I get the feeling that they're going to be using a photo challenge in class tomorrow morning.
Oh, that's awesome. And when you're thinking about that photo challenge, we want to know what kind of ways that you can use different types of photo challenges to teach vocabulary, or to help students learn, about a grammar point, or to help them with the writing or reading. And so we're going to take a look at a few more activities, but we do want you to share as we go on to the next slide, what types of challenges you can think of already to give your particular set of students, or even think about, how can you adapt some of these activities to be able to use with learners that are maybe beginners or learners that are highly advanced and maybe you want them to do much more.
I have an idea. You want to hear mine, Shelley?
Yes,
In
absolutely.
fact, I just thought of this just now. This was not planned ahead of time, but what about asking students, so like a vocabulary homework, giving them a list of vocabulary words and asking them to go and take pictures of them for homework and bring it back. So they don't have to write anything. They just have a list of things they have to photograph and then bring it back.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And you can even tie where other students have to guess what vocabulary word that is.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
we can, get the class to put all their photos of one vocabulary word, or even we can think of vocabulary phrases. So if you're teaching, for example, at a restaurant, they may take a picture of someone interacting with the server and we can kind of guess, what the phrase would be for that as well.
That's right. Sveta recommends it's great to teach prepositions of place for objects. So not just what's the object, but where is the object, right? On top of, underneath, next to, right?
Yes, absolutely. And what's really great is with the photo challenge, then students also get to, since they're taking the picture, then they're learning about the preposition as well, because when they're showing, for example, under, they have to create a photo where, they have the object under and over. So for them, they're going through the movements of interacting with that vocabulary as well.
That's right. And if they're doing it for homework, they're taking English out of the classroom, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And what's really great is that you already mentioned, John Mart, about taking photo examples of the vocabulary. But another idea is to take those photos, your students, from their photo challenges, and they can use that for writing prompts. They can give them to their peers and they can write with that, or they can also use that as a discussion prompt as well.
This would be so easy to do in class because I know so many teachers are already using pictures, right, in class. This is just using pictures that students have taken.
Yes, absolutely. But not only can you take photos, students really enjoy videos. A lot of them even make their own videos. And so let's think of ways that we can have students record videos and also learn English. One of the obvious skills that comes up is speaking. And also listening, and they go hand in hand, but we can also tie in writing and reading. So we're going to take a look at a video activity that I have my students do, which is where they get to create an invention. And when they come up with this invention, they write it down and describe it. And once they've really fleshed it out, then I give them the challenge to record a short commercial that will air on television about their invention. Now,
okay, so wait, so what kind of invention? Like some kind of imaginary time-saving device, for example, like a pen that writes its own homework for you, that kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. And in this example, you can see my student commercial where he actually did that. He has a pen that whatever you think in your mind, it automatically writes down.
Oh, is that what this invention actually was?
Yes, actually,
That's a pretty good invention. I like it.
And what you can get your students to do is then write a script for that commercial. So that way they already know what kind of phrases they're going to use. They can edit each other's scripts to make sure that the English is correct. But the other part of this as well is getting students to record a commercial that is 2 minutes or less. And that kind of fits with watching commercials on television. It's rare that you'll see one that's too long. But the other reason why we do this is because if we have shorter video recordings, then that's much easier to collect. And it's also much easier for you to evaluate. If we had to have videos that were 5 minutes long from over 20 students, that would take a really long time. So it's good to keep the recording short.
Yeah, I can see a lot of really interesting projects coming out of this. You could have students watching and analyzing commercials from television, right? Figuring out, well, how are commercials put together? Then they can brainstorm their own and put it together. This is several class periods here, I'm thinking.
Yes, absolutely. And let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. What we want you to do now is to think of other ways, just like this commercial, and evaluating other commercials. Like John Mark was saying, what are ways that you have used video projects in the classroom that you can think of might be easier with a mobile device? I know sometimes teachers have already had their students create videos. One way that students are able to record a video is also if they pretend they're reporters. If they are broadcasting news, they can show what's happening in the background. They can go to a school function. Maybe they're watching some kind of sports game, and they can, have the video going and talk about what's happening in. Also, students can share their skills. They can create a how-to video. And this is practicing instructions, making sure that they're able to communicate how to do, how to complete a task, such as, cooking a recipe. So all of these ways you can use to record a video, to teach them a particular type of vocabulary or phrasing, and also be able to get students to practice reading, writing, listening, and speaking.
Well, here's a really great video idea that I love. It's from Rania. Her students take videos about, for example, science that they're doing in other classes, not just the English class, right? And so they'll go to the science lab and they'll describe like different parts of like human anatomy, like the human skull, she says, for example. And that's a really great idea to bring in what students are doing outside of English class and use a mobile device to make a video.
Absolutely. And that really helps them with complicated vocabulary as well.
And you mentioned here news broadcasts. In a very recent Facebook Live event, we talked about making student-designed newspapers. A news broadcast would go very well with a project like that.
Absolutely. And there are ways that you can, put that newspaper online, and then it becomes a digital newspaper, and they can include the video. And you'll see actually some examples of popular publications that are doing this. So this would be a really cool way to be able to get student stories to be animated and brought to life as well.
Yeah, I agree. Alex Vasquez says that when he was a learner, one of his students one of his teachers asked him to write and record a song about English grammar and vocabulary.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I want to hear a song about the determiner system.
Like writing a rap or something.
That's right.
That's very cool. And music is definitely a great way to be able to incorporate some of these tasks we're talking about, because students really love listening to English music from different cultures as well. And so they're able to learn the English, practice pronunciation. That's another thing that we should touch on as well. When they record a video, they're able to see the way that they, their body language, but also they're able to see the way the voice impacts the video. You can talk about intonation. I mean, so there's a lot of ways that you can learn English and also, move around and record a video.
One thing we haven't talked about, and Yolanda Ramos has asked the question about assessing these projects. And my guess would be, and you can let me know, Shelley, your perspective, but anything that we do in the classroom, whether it be with a mobile device or not, it needs to be connected to whatever our learning goals are for that class, right? And so if you're supposed to teach certain communicative tasks or certain vocabulary, certain grammatical features, that's what you assess for these projects, right? But it has to be also what you assign for them to do for the project.
Absolutely. Sometimes I'll use what's called a rubric, or I'll have what's called a scoring guide. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is that there's certain, they get ahead of time. Okay. For example, I might say you have to use 3 of the vocabulary words from this list, or you have to use phrasal verbs, and if they hit those points, then they, receive credit for that. Or I could say, oh, you almost did, you almost were able to use phrasal verbs correctly. And so you can provide feedback in that way as well.
Super. Thank you.
And now we're going to move on to recording audio. But not only recording audio, mobile devices are a great way to also learn by listening to audio. And sometimes listening becomes one of those skills that we don't always get to integrate into the classroom. And so if you get students to record audio, this really gets them to be able to be involved in active listening and to see what it takes to be able to build those listening skills. And so let's take a look at some audio recording tasks. Now, this example is a little bit different than the rest of the examples we've shared, which usually involve just one person or the student working in pairs and groups. With this particular one, you only need one device, and it just has to have the ability to record audio, and it's a whole class participation. Okay, so students gather in a circle. You can start off as the teacher. You give a topic, let's say animals, okay, because we're learning about animals with small kids. And we're learning about animals in the North Pole. So when we think about that, then I can start the story, and I model myself recording with the device my start to the story. Once upon a time, there was a polar bear. I hope that I'm right about that. And then the student next to me, I will give them the device, and they record, what comes after my part of the story. And so all of us contribute to this story. And then at the end, we have a recording of that story. Now, another way to do this, as you can tell by the steps here, is that you can tell students that they have to record their part of the story, but they're not allowed to say it really loud for everyone to hear, because the student next to them will listen and then they record their part of the story. So that really gets them to really pay attention, to focus on their listening skills.
That's great. And then what can you do with the recording when you're done with it? Could students transcribe it and write it down?
Yes, absolutely. You can have students, piece together, listen, write down, what the entire story was. Another idea is for students to go back and to be able to fix parts of the story. For example, they can look at maybe some vocabulary words that are new to them and see if they were used correctly, or they might notice that, one of uh, the pronunciation may not be correct. And so it's a good way to have that feedback and to be able to review. And you can always go back and, after making all of these improvements, be able to make an even better story with the class.
We're getting a lot of positive responses from our participants about this idea. Shelley, what I really like about it is that, if we want our students to be successful learners, they're going to have to be independent in their learning, right? And the first step towards independent learning is moving your dependence away from the teacher and towards your classmates, right? And with this one, they're actually working just with each other.
Yes, absolutely. And it gives them a way to also listen for, for errors. And you'll see a lot of times that students with each other, they are a little bit more comfortable letting each other know, I think this is the way you're supposed to say that. And then it also helps them not to be embarrassed, in front of the whole class, but to be able to have the opportunity to correct it. And then they're making a really great story out of it.
Well, I didn't know you could even do this, Shelley, but Daniel Gutierrez recommends having students in a WhatsApp group, and what WhatsApp is like it's like a messaging on audio communication app that's free. They can do a change story on WhatsApp, which means they can even do it for homework.
Yes, absolutely. So if you happen to be like what was mentioned earlier, where you can't use the device in the classroom, then WhatsApp and other types of apps like that really make it easy to be able to do an activity like this.
That's wonderful.
And so let's look at another way you can use the audio recording function. And one way is to be able to conduct interviews. There's so many different types of interviews challenges you can give students. I want to introduce you to one called the 3-2-1 interview. So students work in pairs, and student A records and interviews student B. Student B answers questions, which are 3-2-1. They have to talk about 3 personal facts, maybe a pet or pets that they have, siblings. They could talk about, where they travel to, any type of fact. And then they list 2 of their favorites. So it could be their favorite food, a favorite book, a favorite movie, a favorite player, football, soccer player, depending where you're at. And then one dream, and this dream could be something they want to achieve, like fly on an airplane, or maybe they want to, they have the dream of someday becoming an astronaut, whatever, this dream is. What you can do is get them, your students, to learn how to create questions out of this list. So you see that there's a list here instead of the actual questions, because we want to encourage students to learn how to put this into questions and write this down, because that's part of a good interview, is practicing questions. And then they can record this interview, and then they'll learn about their peer as well.
This would be really good if people are using, from 2 weeks ago, our session on the student newspaper, making an audio recording of interviews or surveys.
Absolutely. And that actually really helps them to be able to, when they are writing the news article, to be able to go back and to listen to it a few times to make sure they get the story and the facts right.
That's great.
I'd be really interested to see what kind of interviews the audience has had students already conduct, or maybe some ideas they have with their current set of students.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I think that in the past, when I was a student, I definitely used audio recordings when I was conducting interviews, just because it made it easier to do the interview if you're not worried about writing down while they're talking, right?
Absolutely. And then you can really listen to them. Interviews also go along with another activity, which is to produce a podcast. And students can also even listen to podcasts to be able to enhance their English. There are a lot of different podcasts that students, such as 6 Minute English or the VOA, Voices of America, which help any listener improve their English. But when they're creating a podcast, it's basically like an ongoing recording over a topic or a theme. You can subscribe to them often in places like iTunes and some other areas online, and then you can listen to them. They're just regular shows. So I'd be interested to see if any of the participants have actually, if they have any podcasts they listen to that they think are great for students to learn English, or if they've had their students create a podcast.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I like the idea of students creating a recording of a piece of writing that they have produced, right? But only if, for example, if it's like a student newspaper or a student blog where they have an audience, they're actually writing for somebody. Sometimes it's nice to be able to have an audio recording of the same thing as well, right?
Oh, yes. And that works really well, especially when you recite. So maybe if they're reciting a speech, that could work really well. And also if they're reciting poetry.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a few questions from our audience. One in particular from Wynn wants to know about if they're recording something for homework on their device, how did they turn in the recording to the teacher?
That's really a great question. So the way that they can turn this in is that you would have to have something, for example, where a Moodle or a WhatsApp, those are really great ways to gather that recording. Another way, which is what I use, is to use what we call a learning management system, something like, for example, Moodle. Or if you have a website set up for the class and they're able to upload there. There's a popular tool called Padlet.com. It's free, and students don't have to register, but it gives them you just give them the website link and they're able to upload videos and audio recordings, as well as writings, PDFs, all kinds of different types of tasks.
That's great. We're getting lots of fantastic suggestions. We want to remind everyone that this recording of today's presentation, it'll stay on our page so you can watch it later if you want to, and on our website or our Ning. So don't worry if you didn't take notes for every single idea.
Yes, it's always great to have the recording. And with that, we're going to go ahead and review what we've looked at. And we want to hear from you. What is the one idea or takeaway from this session that you're excited to try? And we hope you will try this within the week so that way you don't forget. And try it as a student before you give it to the students. That way you feel very confident in class, or more confident in using mobile devices to learn English. And it'll also be able to walk you through the steps of what students might find difficult, or, the technical things they may need to know. So which of the photo challenges or video recording challenges or the audio task or maybe a management tip, how to keep students focused, will you be using this week? And do you have any specific ways you'll be using it? What kind of vocabulary or other ways will you use these types of tips?
Well, Shelley, Cynthia Yelma is already saying she wants to use photo challenges and video projects with her students. And Hassan Sharif wants to use video projects as well. For me, I would be really excited to try and use audio projects in my classroom, because it's not something that I've got a lot of experience with, to be honest.
And I think audio projects are great.
Christina wants to do the chain story. So I get the feeling that her students will be recording a chain story very, very soon.
Oh, that's awesome. And of course, you can always, if you're given permission and the students don't mind, we would love to see these ideas on the Facebook page, or, if you want to make it more private, the English teaching forum would be a great place, and we would all appreciate it.
That's great. I agree. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for offering such wonderful ideas and suggestions and sharing with us and being so enthusiastic. So I hope you feel a lot more confident in using mobile devices to inspire your students to practice English in and outside of the classroom. We hope that we have helped you with some of the hurdles and the challenges that you might face. And if you have any other questions, you can definitely get with me or connect with me on Facebook or Twitter, or even on my website or my blog.
Well, Shelley, thank you so much for being here with us today and for these incredible ideas. We were very, very lucky to have you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, John Mark. It's been fun, and it's been a wonderful, active audience.
Yes, for sure. I think the audience really appreciated the suggestions, for adapting the idea with classes with different levels of access to technology and resources. And so thanks again.